Welcome to the Directing Animation Livecast with Scott Weiser, who has gone from a studio of one to directing at Spacestation Animation to supervising at Steamroller Animation, continuously developing over 15 feature film pitches on a quest to master the art of making deeply meaningful animated films.
All right. That intro is now almost 2 years old. And I've worked at Steamroller for 2 years this month, and that's wonderful. So it's about time to get a new intro, but that's okay. There's new news coming soon. Today, our guest is Ron Friedman. Ron Friedman was actually my guest at the Salt Lake Animation Expo, which is now called Sketch to Screen and everything in between. And sadly, but kind of not sadly, because we get to have this conversation now, the technology failed us. The recording, half the audio was missing, and so it was like, Ron, how about you just come on here on the show? So a little bit about Ron. He has worked in the industry for years. He worked on classics such as The Page Master and Swan Princess, and has done several different types of work, all the way from 2D into 3D, doing Previz work, supervising animation on Pan's Labyrinth, and all kinds of things. So he's kind of sketch to screen and everything in between, in a way, you know? And more recently, he has a website called toonanimations.com, where he...
Yeah. Oh, I was going to say, actually, we've rebranded and all that stuff. So instead of Toonimations anymore, it's now animationtrainers.com.
Okay. And that's your YouTube channel, which I have linked down in the show notes, which is great.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Anything else to add to that?
No, basically, once I decided to start the YouTube channel, I decided to just switch everything over to that name.
Yeah.
I just didn't want to confuse people.
Great.
Hey, how's it going? Thank you so much for having me again. Like you were saying, there's a part of me that's kind of glad that that technical snafu occurred, because a lot has happened over the course of the last 4, 5, 6 months or whatever that it was, because that was earlier in 2024. Was that in April, at the beginning of April?
That was around there.
No.
It was
March?
May.
It was May.
Yeah.
Okay. So, so if it was May, then had things already begun happening when we were talking?
With what?
As far as like me being at third floor and stuff?
Yeah, you were still at the third floor. Yeah.
Yeah, then it had to have been March, because I
Yeah.
wasn't at third floor in May. That's kind of my point.
Oh, I think you're right then.
Okay. So basically, we might as well get into that.
Yeah, let's get into it.
Basically, what happened was, last year we had the writers and actors strikes in 2023, and when the actors went on strike, one of the producers was quoted as saying, "We're going to starve them out of their bleeping houses." And Ron Perlman had vocally expressed his disdain at that person's comments and stuff. But a lot of people started talking about that issue. Like, what do we do if they do that? There might not necessarily even be legal repercussions. There might not necessarily be something illegal about it. It might just be morally reprehensible.
Mm-hmm.
And so, sure enough, that's exactly what has happened ever since, the original prognosis was, because the strikes ended sometime in the fall. It was like, well, Thanksgiving and Christmas are right around the corner, and the studios are usually closed between Christmas and New Year's anyway, and everything. So we're sure things will pick back up in January. This is basically what everybody has been thinking in the industry. I mean, there's been more than one article in the Los Angeles Times now about how jobs have been affected by what's going on.
Wow.
People expected things to be back in January. January rolls around, nothing's happening. So February, nothing. Finally, in March, they start asking, and everyone is saying the same thing. It's kind of like it's all been rehearsed. Well, the strikes last year really cost us a lot of money, and we still have the negotiations with IATSE and all the daughter unions, as well as the Teamsters, at the end of July. So we think we're just going to kind of sit tight until the end of July.
Yeah.
And so suddenly studios had no idea when they were going to have more work, and the people they thought they had cut down to and were going to be enough turned out, oh, we have to get even thinner, you know?
Yeah.
And so there's been a ton of layoffs in not just film and television, but also in games. And it's not like, I mean, they've learned not to say the quiet parts out loud, unfortunately. So we don't know what their motivation is, but the thinking is that they are buying as much time as possible to see what AI will be able to do for them and what jobs it'll be able to eliminate, etc. Because now we've gotten even more expensive because we want to pay rent and stuff. It's crazy. And groceries, etc. So the thing is that why, that's why there's been such a dirge of entertainment in film and television. Netflix over the summer had a huge thing. Netflix is a joke, right? And it was for weeks and weeks, all these comedy specials. Do you know why they did that? Because you don't have to pay writers. When you have comedians, it's all covered under one thing, and so it doesn't fall under those contracts, etc. There are some people who also believe that this is pure bitterness, that this is just anger at the fact that things aren't the way they used to be, and they're going to buy less yachts. You know what I mean? That might be a simplification, but I always think about the story. There's been a story recently, in not too long ago, in the papers and stuff, about the founders of the Arizona Tea Company. They continue to only charge 99 cents a can for their product and have the entire time that product has been available. And so they asked them, why have you not increased the price of the cans along with everything else, considering inflation, etc.? And they said that it is still within our realm of profitability to keep the price at 99 cents. There's a part of us that doesn't feel comfortable with the idea of charging more than $1 for a can of tea. And so if it means we take a little less money, then so
Wow.
what a concept. And so the thing is that if everyone just at some point goes, okay, look, this is the new reality. Everyone is going to have to we're all going to have to understand that we're all going to make a certain amount, and this is how we're going to do it,
Yeah.
Uh, there definitely was a kind of overkill of content with the induction of streaming.
Yeah.
Everybody wanted to get into that and they didn't know,
What it was going
and
to be. Yeah.
that was also part of the union situation, to be fair. Producers did not know how they were going to make money on streaming or how much they would make on streaming. And so they had asked actors, writers, and other production craftspeople to take a cut on anything that was for streaming.
Yeah.
Well, that needed to be renegotiated in these last strikes. That's part of the reason the strikes happened, is because they didn't want to have to pay more, but meanwhile, everybody else had agreed to take less for the last 3 years, and so they wanted to kind of get back on track. It's all very awkward,
It
like
is very awkward.
I went to go see Marvel's Wolverine, Deadpool and Wolverine last night for the third time.
Oh.
Okay. I saw it the first time with my sons. I saw it the second time with my girlfriend, and I saw it this last time with a friend from Third Floor
Yeah.
who had not seen it yet, and we wanted to see it while it was still in theaters. That movie is so good. That movie has taken my money 3 times,
Yeah.
and it is doing so well because it's good.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the thing is that if they take the time to make sure that story is really working and that things are good, that's good. They should do that. That is appropriate, And so, well, just honestly, the fact of the matter is that there is a thirst for content. There's no question there's a thirst for content.
Yeah.
I think that it is absolutely possible that we have to, like, look at the music industry, right? Originally, it was all these big record companies, and when all that fell through, it took a while for that industry to become comfortable with the idea that people have to promote themselves and people have to do this and X, Y, and Z in order to kind of break through, because you can't rely on just getting hooked up with some big company anymore.
No, yeah, and that's the reality I'm living in right now. Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so the thing is that, if overall less big movies are going to get made because less people are going to theaters, like, there's going to be a happy medium. It used to be that people were making movies, and movies was basically the best way of getting out and going to see entertainment, and so that's what everybody did. I mean, there was a period of time where movies was all you had, and then TV came along, and the whole home watch versus movie theater watch has been an issue for a very long time.
Yeah.
And and so it's just we're at it again. But the ability to watch stuff at home has never been better.
Yeah.
But if they make stuff that is fun to go to the theater to see, people are going.
Oh
So
yeah.
you just need to make good stuff.
Yeah, I look at the Studio Ghibli films every time I see them. It's easy for there are other films that are like this, but it's in particular these ones I notice because they're always on the shelves at Walmart and I want to buy them. I already have them, right? And then they play them every year in the fall at certain movie theaters. They will play the film like for a couple nights. Each one of those
Right.
Studio Ghibli films. It's because they're so fantastic, you know. And yeah, so I totally resonate. And actually, what you were talking about that tea thing, you made me think of Simon Sinek and Leaders Eat Last and his whole topic he gives about a company. It's a story about a company that they are going to have to lay people off. They're at that period of a business, of time in a business where you confront that, right? And I actually had a neighbor who did that just recently, bought a business and had to lay a bunch of people off. And he said there was no other choice. I'm like, I wish you would talk to me because I've listened to Simon Sinek and Leaders Eat Last. And what he talks about how is with true leadership, you eat last, right? You make certain sacrifices for the people who you serve and who serve with you together. You're a team, right? And what they did in this company, instead of doing the layoffs, is they just asked the company, everybody in the company, to take 1 month off. That was the calculation they ran. If you take 1 month off, every single person, unpaid, then we will be able to not have to lay a single person off. And then what they did from there was they let people just decide what they were going to do, and they ended up negotiating with each other. So some people were like, oh, I have these savings. I can take 2 months off. You can have my month. Or, you know, they started to negotiate with each other and be very generous with each other, right? And I mean, that's the way to run a business or the way to run an industry is to really think about everybody involved and what's a different solution that wasn't laying people off before, you know?
And I will say this to Third Floor's credit, they unfortunately were in a situation where they had
Oh,
to
right.
let some people go in April, just as a result of the fact that they're like, we only even know to have enough to keep this number of people fed. We thought you guys included was going to be who we were going to have moving forward and work was going to start coming in, but with no work coming in, we can't pay with what we don't have. We can't pay with air.
And
And
that's a different situation
and
than what
that's
I'm
totally,
describing.
well, not
Yeah.
only that, but also the thing is even leading up to that. The founders initially were foregoing their salaries in order to make sure that they were
Oh,
getting
that's
everything paid.
amazing. Yeah.
They are that kind of company. And so that's why I, have had that kind of allegiance with them, right?
Yeah, yeah.
And so I do not blame them or anything. It's no one's fault except the producers who are not getting back to work and not letting everyone else get back to work.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
So as soon as they decide that it's time to stop, playing the deep pockets game, then great. Everyone can get back to work and things will go back to normal and we'll see where we are again in 3 years.
We shall see. We shall see. Yeah.
You know,
So
but
since
honestly, that
then,
was part of the reason that I started the channel was
yeah.
because I realized that. So basically, when I suddenly found myself without work, I was like, all right, well, I need to do something. And I had always talked about doing a YouTube channel, and I had people tell me you should do a YouTube channel. You'd be good at that. And I always thought it would be fun, but I knew that it was something that you only get one chance at making a first impression.
Yes.
That it's a lot of commitment and a lot of work. And so I had been putting it off. But one of the first things that popped into my head was, well, I guess that now is the time for that. Basically, if I come out the other side of this and are going back to work and I didn't spend that time doing this, then I'm really never going to forgive myself for that. And so I started it in earnest, and it's been awesome, and I started it A, because I wanted to do that, and B, because I was hoping maybe it'll, pull in a little extra money with me being without work. And that part has not actually fruition very much. And the reason is because even though my rate for a private 30-minute session, with me, to my knowledge, I don't think there is anything else out there that's that affordable that you could do that.
Yeah.
But the number of people who are looking for even that situation is a handful.
Yeah.
And if I can't get in front of those people to let them know that opportunity exists, then I basically created a situation. And this is kind of like a business, almost like a, running a business kind of, TED talk all of a sudden, and creating content and trying to make money that way.
Yeah.
I had created two options for people who were watching the channel. You can either give me nothing except your, comments and likes, or you could give me $40 for 30 minutes, which is a lot of money. And so I was like, man, there's got to be I remembered actually back when I was doing more tutoring and had been pushing that a little bit more when I was living in Massachusetts. I had people when I was doing stuff for digital tutors and stuff, and so people were kind of aware of me. They would find me on LinkedIn and reach out and be like, "Do you have anything that's more affordable than what you are advertising on Tunamate? Like anything that's like around $10?" Because I live in a country where we don't make that kind of money, and so that amount of money, you know what I mean? Like $10 might not be a lot for you. $10 is a lot of money for me. And that was back then, and so I thought about that, and I was like, all right, what could I do that would allow people an opportunity to be able to kind of get involved and be able to engage with me for less than that. And so I had thought about doing some kind of a membership like they do on YouTube, but to get to where you can become an affiliate partner, the requirements, the criteria, you have to have a minimum 1,000 subscribers. You have to have a minimum 3,000 hours watched over the last 365 days. I understand that all those things exist as a gatekeep tool for YouTube to not have to deal with monetizing all these channels immediately. I get that. But Patreon actually was created by its founder because of that whole situation of how long it can take creators to be able to get rewards from the people watching their channel without other people dipping their hands in. And so he started Patreon. And so I was like, well, I'll start a Patreon page. And that's exactly what I did. Actually, just yesterday, premiered a video that describes it. I haven't even put a link to the Patreon page on animationtrainers.com yet. That's how new this is. But if you go to patreon.com/animation trainers, there are tiers. Basically, someone had suggested just having a $1 a month tier, like a tip jar kind of thing, like a thanks for the vids. And I was like, okay. But then as far as actual like rewards and stuff, there's a $4 a month tier, which we call student tier. And that allows you 1 day early access to any YouTube videos. And also the vault that we will be building of these live streams we're going to be doing, you will have access to those. So you won't have access to like in the chat. You're not like in the live stream. You can't ask questions or participate. But after it goes up, you have full access to that vault at that tier. The next tier up would be trainee, animation trainers training again. It is so adorable. And that is basically for $2 a week. I will be doing a 1 hour live stream. And if somebody there's basically a shot bin in Dropbox that members will have access to. And if they're working on a shot or they finish something that they want to show off to the channel or anything, people can just drop it in there, and I will pick 4 things at random and give each thing about 15 minutes and kind of talk about it. So if it's a clip that somebody is working on, we can talk about how to push it, how to do this, how to do that. And the exchange that people are getting for making this public and not doing it privately with me is that everyone gets to learn from it. There's a reason why studios do sweatboxing like that in a group, because it's an opportunity for everyone to learn.
Yeah.
I don't know if people know why it's called sweatboxing, by the way. So back in the day when they were working on like, the old Mickey Mouse cartoons and that kind of thing, they would basically use just closet space in order to be able to keep those machines out of the way. The moviola machines that you run the film on and be able to like look at it on the screen and be able to see it. It was those machines they would put them in these little rooms, and everyone would gather around the moviola and look at the screen to see the thing in real time, running at 24 frames a second. And it would get so hot, these 12 grown men sitting in this closed room, and it's hot, and this hot machine is projecting. And so that's why they called it the sweat box. But it was also called the sweat box because you're like, oh God, I hope my shot gets approved.
Yeah.
And so yeah, and they still call it that to that day. It's the same reason that they call an exposure sheet even though we don't write out on exposure sheets anymore, but we still call it that.
Yeah. Or X sheet.
Yeah. Anyway, so yeah, that tier you actually get to participate. You actually get to, be in the live streams and do whatever and participate that way. And as well as having access to the vault and everything else. And then the last one is honestly just for like bragging rights and that kind of thing. Like if you are in a situation where you're just like, I love the channel, I want to help out in any way I can. There's a $16 a month patron level. And that means that you have access to our members only Discord server. So basically you can just talk to me whenever you want. And everybody else in the community. And the thing is, as the community grows, I'm hoping that it's going to become a more vibrant thing. Oh, you also get your name. There'll be at the end of the video, a thank you to our patrons, and we'll put their name. I'm not going to start that until I get into the actual patrons, but they will be, thanked via text in every single video that the channel comes out with from here to eternity. And the thing is that, it's not a lot of money per person to contribute, but it can add up, and I'm hoping that this kind of thing, I intend to keep doing this forever. Like, this is what I plan to do as kind of a working retirement,
Yeah.
and just keep this going. Because I know I'm not going to be able to ever just stop working.
Right. Yeah.
The last 5 months has proved that more than ever.
You just kept moving. Well, I remember your energy and how you talked about your passion for the work. And I remember you gave me some perspectives on different things, like you're talking about how big of a difference Previz does and how big of a difference camera moves make to a film. And those are the things you're figuring out. And you're actually saving the filmmakers a cost by doing that work, right?
Absolutely. So,
Yeah.
so basically the whole idea with pre-visualization is in the same way that creating a thumbnail can give you an idea of whether or not you're getting visually, if a pose is communicating what it is you hope to. You can solve things small by kind of doodling it out, right?
Mhm.
Previz is basically the more full version of that. You are creating a little three-dimensional animated movie of your movie. It doesn't look super fancy. It's not meant to be super fancy, not yet. But basically, the number of times that a client, a filmmaker, will swear up and down that, we wrote it that way and we boarded it that way, it's going to be fine. And then you actually put it in a situation where
No.
you're like, well, here is a 35mm camera with this, a 50mm lens, actually, like here's a film camera with a 50mm lens on a studio space that you said this is how big your sound stage is, and this is how big your actors are, and that's that camera, and this is what that looks like. And they're like, oh. So the thing is that the not only is it an extremely effective tool for being able to solve those kinds of problems before you're on a set and spending thousands and thousands of dollars an hour, filming a movie. But also, to be perfectly honest, it will introduce things you didn't even think about. You're like, oh, what is that? Oh, that's the oh my God, we're gonna have to like push everything out by this because that doesn't look right. Da, 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 da. It gives you an opportunity to be able to trial by fire those issues
Mhm.
before you're in a situation where like, well, there is nothing we can do about it now. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So it's extremely valuable.
Well, we
But
still make
having-
camera changes in animation, but usually you're so close with the layout
Well, it's
Um,
interesting. So it's interesting. My understanding, and like for example, the way they even describe it in the DreamWorks pipeline, video that they had released back in the day, is that, and my understanding too from my friend Allison Leaf, who works in the layout department at Pixar, is that basically they animate the camera and that's locked, like
oh,
camera's locked. Said that doesn't mean that they can't change camera and animation,
mhm,
but you have to go through an entire approval process to get that camera unlocked and have it go through revision again.
right,
Because they're going to start lighting, they're going to start doing all these other things based on what the camera's going to see, because you said that's the camera.
right,
So,
yeah,
so yeah, they take that stuff pretty seriously, and in all honesty, ends up being the most important job of the layout department. They are thinking about, okay, once these guys are moving, what does this need to cover? What does this need to do? And I need to make sure, because this is it. Uh, and I gotta tell you that once I started actually doing that as part of my job duties, and having to be aware of cinematography and everything, it's one of those things where you see it everywhere, right? When you start studying animation, there's a point where every time you see something move, you're analyzing it like an animator, or whenever you watch a piece of animation, you're watching it as an animator, not as just a person. And same thing, you end up starting to notice cinematography in everything you watch, like you kind of can't help it, and it's the price you pay. You want to be behind the curtain? Well, it's not that pretty behind the curtain. that's that's kind of what it boils down to, right? It's like the page master. You mentioned the page master. You want to know the downside of working on the page master? The downside of working on the page master was there was this entire sequence with the Frankenstein monster, where the Frankenstein monster was chasing Richie Tyler and the three books and stuff. And basically, they got to a point where I think they decided to just cut it for time. They didn't feel it was really moving the story forward. They had Hyde, Jekyll and Hyde, and they had already spent all this time with that. And so now with Frankenstein, they just kind of moved, like he appears, and then all of a sudden they're up on the roof, and then they get the hell out of there. And there was this whole thing where they're like fighting him, holding him down on the door, and like it was great. I know about this part of the movie that has never been released to the public, and no one will ever know. There's people who've told me, like, oh my God, like actually, the guy who did this tattoo for me, his girlfriend is a huge fan of the Page Master. When he found out I worked on that movie, he was like, no way. And I told him about that thing, and I was like, there's no way to see it. Like, there's no way to see it.
yeah,
Yeah. So, there's always a price to pay for getting to be involved. You're aware of what it could have been.
yeah,
And that isn't always worse than what came out.
yeah, yeah. That's very true. And yeah, speaking. I mean, listening to you, you know, I can see how great it would be to have you as a mentor, right? Because some people don't. Some people don't realize, like, we have a influx. We have a massive stream, like we have a flood of information that is on YouTube, right? And
Oh,
so you can
sure.
find out a lot of the things you need to know, like the technical things. The great thing
Right.
about a mentor is a mentor's been there. A mentor can help you navigate those things. A mentor can help you sort through that content and say, yeah, that content's not really worth your time versus that content is a bit more worth your time, right?
Not only
And
that.
this happens everywhere. Like I'm actually currently, there's a program at Steamroller where some of us mentor future leaders in the company, and it was really cool, like, to discuss this yesterday with my mentee about finding mentors that are from various walks of life but connect to what you ultimately want to do.
Hmm.
And that can be incredibly useful because they're going to see things you just do not see because they've walked paths you have not walked, you know.
Of course, right?
Yeah,
They have life experience that you weren't accounting for, and that the kind of thing that they don't necessarily cover in an academic situation, right? You're going to learn from those experiences. There's a ton of things that I will do something, and people are like, "Wait, what was that you just did?" And I'm like, "Oh, I just did this thing." I like if you middle mouse click da 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 and hit this, it's a quick way of getting a third on a timing instead of going to a third, setting a key, grabbing the keys, moving it over, blah. And they were like, "Oh my God, but that will save so much time." And it's one of these little
Yeah.
that you don't think about, but when someone else goes, "That's cool. What's that cool thing?"
Hmm.
They're like, "Oh, that is cool. I didn't realize that
And that
that was."
happens for being together. That physical time together. You're in the
Sure,
sweatbox. You're in the environment. You're and that's the challenge of remote work that
it
I
is.
think I think we've been doing really well with at Steamroller is just finding those ways to have those interactions, so you get those surprising discoveries.
Yes, happy accidents, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome. That's really awesome that, and that's all you can do, right? All you can do is try to foster that
Hmm.
and create those opportunities and see if they, happen. Uh yeah, that's really great. And the thing is too is that I absolutely there's a difference between there are plenty of people out there who can tell you how to drive a car. And by that I mean they can tell you that this is the steering wheel, and if you turn the wheel left, the car will go left, and if you turn the wheel right, you will go right, and the gas pedal makes the car go, and the brake pedal makes the car stop. There are plenty of people who can do that video. There are only a handful of people who can teach you how to drive like a professional race car driver.
Yeah.
Mario Andretti, okay, he also can teach you how to drive a car, but there's a difference between one is teaching you how to operate an automotive vehicle, and the other one is teaching you how to be a race car driver.
Hmm.
There's two very different things.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
I love
so
that.
when I teach, what I'm teaching is being a performer through animated objects. You know what I mean? Like it is a somewhat different beast. There is this great channel. I think her name is Sakana, Sakana. She is a Chinese motion capture artist. She's on a team that does mocap for games in Asia and stuff like that. And when you watch the videos of them, the way they walk and gesture, and the thing is that it looks over the top on a regular person. But when you see that exact motion on this animated character right next to it, it's perfect. It's exactly what it needs to be.
Hmm.
They are doing that exaggeration that is necessary on an object like that to make it look normal. I have this whole theory about why, for example, Robert Zemeckis is an incredibly talented filmmaker. So why didn't all the Image Movers digital films work? All the mocap stuff. He got so invested in that. Polar Express and Monster House and Mars Needs Moms and all those movies. And they didn't sit right. And I think the reason for that is because they were taking real motion and applying it to realistic
Ish.
characters, but they're
Yeah.
not fully real. So like for example, when you take real emotion and you put it on something like Gollum, which is a character that's amongst other humans and it's in a real world environment, and so it should be moving real world, and you put real world movement on it, then that's 100 to 100, and that feels okay, and we're good, right? If Polar Express is like a 90, like it looks kind of a 90, but it's a little stylized, guess what? You need to have motion that's about 90, but a little bit stylized. But no, they took real motion and put it on that, and our brains go, "Ugh." Like there's a gag reflex. You know what I mean? It's just like, I don't know why I don't like it, but I don't like it. And
Yeah.
I think it is because it's like unsettling. It's like we don't know if we can trust what we're seeing. I
Hmm.
mean, I think it taps into like fight or flight instinctual stuff. I don't
Ooh, that's interesting. That's interesting because
it's like genetic. Like I inherently don't trust what I'm seeing because there's something wrong about the way this thing is moving or acting, and
yeah.
I don't like it. I don't
Yeah.
like it. I don't feel safe, you
Interesting, because
know?
when I first saw AI, I was a bit excited actually. There were things that I'd been thinking about automation that I'm like, "Oh, maybe this could speed up the process," right? I jump in and I start using some AI image generators, and I felt ill. It made me physically sick, and I was like I thought maybe it was like a spiritual thing or like Well, I'm an artist, so, but then I found that they're starting to notice this is happening with a lot of people, and they were comparing it to motion sickness, right?
Hmm.
And
That might have something to do with it.
who knows? Who knows?
I wonder if it's something along those lines where you're like, it's too real to be made up, but it's not real enough to be real. So I say, "Brr." Like I
Yeah,
just reject. I don't like.
yeah,
Me no like he, like it is literally just it's like when you tell a kid, why won't you eat? I don't know. I just don't like it. I
yeah,
don't like it. I can't explain why. I just don't. I know I don't like it. And I know if you make me eat it, I'll like it even less. I have to
hmm
quote, that's George Carlin. I can't take credit for that. Anyway, um,
and Emperor's New Groove, the Milo Likey.
yeah, but
Yeah.
anyway, so I was going back to that mocap actress, like that ability to understand that you need to apply that motion to this thing. Well, that still is going to be true, okay? No matter how easy, no matter how affordable motion capture data might become, okay? Like, okay, people I address this the same way that people used to address the idea of like using video reference. There's
hmm
this notion that if I use video reference, that's somehow cheating, that I'm a better animator if I make up an action and movement in my head and therefore do that. And it's like, what are you talking about? Do you have any idea how much people like the nine old men would love to be able to go back and say, "No, no, no, no. Tell me again." You can take reference and you can go through frame by frame, backwards and forwards, and it tells you exactly what frame number. You spoiled child.
Give that to me.
Exactly. Where was this when I was doing this? We used to have it be in a sweatbox. You know, yeah. So that the technology of how to take movement that
hmm
here's the thing. I started doing some mocap where I would do mocap and then I would take it and then I would plus it.
hmm
So
Yeah.
that was very much like it's still mine. Who cares that I'm starting with this instead of starting with that? Click, click,
Right.
click. You know what I mean? It's still me creating a performance. So why not?
Yeah.
I think it'd be valuable for people to get more comfortable with that. Obviously, mocap is still an expensive. There's still kind of a threshold with the cost of both the hardware and the software.
Yeah.
Um, but
And AI is
honestly,
looking kind of like mocap
VR,
now too.
well, with VR and everything else,
Yeah.
like Sony had already, or somebody like a third-party developer for Sony had come up with a 6-point tracking system that worked pretty well. And the
hmm
thing is, that stuff's just going to keep getting better and better.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely.
Just going to keep getting better and less expensive.
Yeah. Less and less expensive.
So
Absolutely.
eventually, yes, we might be creating performances at least initially this way, and why not? It's a quick way of getting stuff on there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Uh, and then massaging it from there. Is it possible that we're going to have to get comfortable with animating directly in a game engine as opposed to animating in a 3D animation software or 2D animation software and then animating and then moving that into a game engine for the sake of authoring or something? Yeah, sure. A lot of people are starting to do that. And of course, Unreal and Unity and stuff are pushing like, oh, yeah, you come to us, like do it all with us.
Yeah.
Uh, they're trying to make those tools available.
hmm
Obviously, companies like Autodesk have had a longer time to develop those tools and have them be better. I still prefer animating in a package like Maya, but it's getting better all the time.
Yeah.
And I definitely see the advantage. There's definitely an advantage to working directly within a game engine and being able to immediately see your work moving in full color, and it's pretty
Oh yeah.
incredible.
We had I had Mark Andrews, who had formerly directed Brave or
Yeah.
co-directed Brave,
Mhm.
on the show like a year or so ago, and he was talking about a show he and his team busted out in a very short period of time called Super Giant Robot Bros. And they even skipped the storyboarding process almost, which is very interesting. They went right in and they were directing the camera like they were directing actors, and they just caught the whole thing in motion capture. Then animators go in and fix it. But it was a very fascinating process. But he's a story artist, so he's not trying to replace story artists or like get rid of them. He was just like, let's experiment with this, see how it informs our filmmaking process and makes it better. And he was able to do something pretty inexpensively.
The thing is like going back to what we were talking about having to kind of look at the entire industry in a new way and figure out what the new normal is going to be. The opportunity for people to create projects and put it out there and be able to kind of like get some money for it or whatever is, that didn't exist before. There was not a way of being able to create content and put it out there and make it available for people and have them be able to give you money. I remember what a big deal it was. What band was it? Was it Radiohead that released an album and forwent the record companies and basically just put it up online and everybody paid them $1 or $2 or whatever it was, but the money went straight to them.
Yeah.
And if you don't think record companies are like, stop looking at the man behind the curtain, you know what I mean? So the thing is that the flip side of that is that now people have to kind of pull up their bootstraps and do all those things for themselves. They have to promote themselves. They have to, get their stuff out there and take those things into consideration. But the tools are there to be able to do it.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
it's definitely interesting how things have changed, but there's always going to be some form of storytelling. People are always going to want to take some time to be able to just forget about whatever they've actually got going on in their lives and be told a story,
Yeah.
and escaped, right? We have always wanted that, going all the way back to just sitting around a campfire and going, I'm exhausted from walking and hunting all day. Just tell me a story before I go to bed.
Yeah.
That stuff going back again, genetics goes way back. And so there's always going to be that, but we're also always interested in new ways to do that storytelling. Like, oh, look, fancy, cool, this is neat.
Yeah.
We don't churn our own butter.
No.
That's okay. You know what I mean? So
Well, some people do, and they find value
well,
in that.
and that's fine, that's fine, but it doesn't mean that we're all going to start churning our own butter again.
No.
And the thing is that, definitely one of my favorite things, there's a John Cleese movie called Clockwise. And in that movie, he's the headmaster of this English prep school. And anything that can go wrong for this man on that day does.
Yeah.
And his whole adage is, right, accept, adapt, and improve. And he basically, you need to accept the situation you're in. You need to adapt to this new situation. That's just surviving.
Yeah.
Then to be able to grow, you need to improve upon that new situation. And I loved that statement. And it was kind of meant to be funny that this man is always doing that. But it also is the reason that it ended up all working out, because he did that every time life threw something in this man's way. He would accept the situation, he would adapt to it, and then try to figure out a way to improve upon it. And
That's what we all have to do.
Yeah.
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 I was
5 months has taught me that tremendous.
A few months ago, I was running one of the top teams at Steamroller, and it was smooth moving. And then I moved to a new project, right, to learn more about leadership. And it's not easy. It's not easy. It's a fantastic company, so it's going really well. But
and that's awesome. And the thing is that not everyone enjoys being in a situation like that. Not everyone enjoys leading a team of other people creating things as opposed to just being creators.
You have to be willing to experience pain, like very real pain, because it's like, this thing happened, and I have to make a certain sacrifice as a leader. I am concerned about my people and how it applies to them, and every time you make even a little move, it involves, a little bit of personal sacrifice if you make the right move,
Right.
And so cool. Well, this has been a great discussion. The last question I usually ask is the Get Wiser moment. And I actually do think you probably have a unique insight on this one. So this is going to be cool.
Okay.
My question is usually, if my goal is to get the highest concentration of truth and meaning into a film, what approach would you recommend?
So I think that it is important to keep in mind that the definition of those words is different for everyone.
Of truth and meaning.
Of truth and meaning. Well, like of like if something is meaningful. Some people can consider something very meaningful, and other people can consider that not meaningful.
Oh,
at
absolutely,
all,
yes.
right?
Hmm.
Just the same way that people can consider something good or bad or quality or not quality, etc. That to me is a clear indication that your direction should not be based on making everyone happy
Right.
or solving things by committee, because you are by definition going to have people that are not going to agree with each other, and therefore you will never be able to make everyone happy. And
Yeah.
what you'll end up with, in order to attempt to make everyone as little minimally unhappy as possible, you dilute everything to make it not too much of anything so as not to upset anyone.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is that every single time something has come out where it was really great and it might have been a little different than other things that have been out recently, and people are like, what made you come up with this idea, or what made you decide to be kind of ballsy enough to do this or that? The answer almost inevitably is, we didn't care what other people thought. We were just chain ourselves.
Yeah, yeah. Seth
And it's
Godin.
the thing is that meant that, but that workflow
Yeah.
is actually, uh it sounds like a throwaway. It sounds like meh, like we were just making ourselves happy. No one is going to be a worse critic than you about what you think is good. And so if you're putting stuff out there and this is what you think is funny, yeah, there are going to be some people who do not find what you did funny. But the people who find what you did funny are going to think it's hilarious.
Yeah.
And they're going to love that you had the courage to do this thing that was outside the norm for them.
Hmm.
You know,
Yeah,
it might
absolutely.
be it might be, there might be some people that think that that is the worst movie that it was ever made.
Yeah.
And there are some people who literally would go to an island with that movie.
Yeah. I was saying, but I didn't want to talk over you, that Seth Godin, he's one of the best artistic marketers I've seen out there. And he says, you've made a mistake if somebody doesn't walk out of your film in the theater.
I think that there's validity to that. If you
Yeah.
look at people like, I was listening to Mel Brooks, his audiobook and stuff, and he's like, there's no way that some of the movies I've made could even get made now.
No.
But at the time, it was important that those conversations happened because there were things going on and it needed to be illustrated how kind of silly all that was. You know what I mean? And so it is interesting how, like, there's a part of me that absolutely agrees that we are more progressive than we used to be, but there's also a part of me that doesn't love the fact that there was a period of time where we used to be able to say things that we can't say now. Like, I'm very anti-censorship, so
Okay.
I'm a grown-up. I can hear things and it's okay. You know what I
Okay.
mean?
Nice.
So that's just my mentality.
Mm-hmm. It's a good
And I
mentality.
know that people, yeah, well, and I know that there are people who, might feel differently and they feel what they're doing is right. And that's cool. And that's a whole other conversation. But yeah, I want to learn as much as I can and to continue growing as much as I can. And that is one of the things that comes from interacting with, like, students. Like when I started teaching when I was in Massachusetts and everything, they bring that enthusiasm, that excitement, that, oh my God, you get to do this for a living. I want to get to do this for a living. Isn't this great? And you're like, yeah, this is great. You know what? This is great. And they remind you that we're lucky to get to do what we do.
Yeah, absolutely lucky. It's very true. I love your answer. Thank you. And yeah, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much for being on the show, Ron.
Thank you very
The
much
links
for
that he
having me.
described and other links that I mentioned are going to be down in the show notes. I'll put your Patreon down in there as well.
Thank you so much.
And until next time, I hope we all get a little wiser.
Thank you for watching the Directing Animation Livecast, hosted by Scott Weiser, audio version edited by Kira Horowitz, copyright Scott Weiser LLC 2024. Don't forget to subscribe and ring that notification bell.